Good morning, Dr. McKim. I am preparing this presentation for you in advance of the meeting that I'm having with my dissertation committee tomorrow. I know that you're not able to join us until about 30 or 35 minutes into the meeting. So what I've done is I've prepared the presentation and I've prepared this video so that should you have a chance to take a look at it, you will be prepared to kind of come in where everybody else comes in. I've worked with Dr. Burrows for some preliminary format for my presentation, and if I hear back from her, this presentation may be slightly different if she adds edits, but it'll be basically intact. And if there's anything significant, I will let you know. So having said that, I would like to begin with my presentation. And here's my shared screen. Okay, so let me make sure I have this. All right, so first of all, I've already met you several times. I've had the pleasure of taking several classes from you, but my name is Astrid Northrup, and I'm a professional engineer in Wyoming and in Colorado. I'm also a faculty member at Northwest College in Powell, Wyoming, where I serve as division chair for physical sciences. And I have recently been promoted to full professor of engineering and math. So I've been involved in engineering education for quite some time. I've been a full-time faculty member at Northwest College since 1997. So this is my 24th year of teaching engineering science at the college level. I'm also a PhD student in science education with a minor in quantitative research methods. As I mentioned before, many of those courses I had the pleasure of taking from you. And I'm here to talk about my research study proposal. So continuing with this line of thought, I took my comprehensive exams on January 6th and January 7th of this year. And after I had completed them, I was asked to supply some more information on 3 of the 5 questions. The first 2 questions, which were a background question and I would classify as a description of my philosophy of teaching engineering students or engineering education and my own background, I was granted full pass. The second question, which was about the methodology of one of the papers that I propose, was also full pass. And so questions 3, 4, and 5 were questions that I was asked by the committee to provide some more information. Question 3 was the justification of my proposed research on computational science in the K-12 classroom based on relevant research theory and national standards. On this point, I was asked to tie my research study into national standards and to do a more comprehensive literature review. So in the process of rewriting or the additions to my comprehensive exams, which I did on March 6th and 7th, I talked about some of the prevailing literature by the authors that I've cited here are Hugweiser, Guven, Dong, and Lee. And they talk about the issue of integrating computer science across the curriculum rather than teaching it as a siloed subject. They also talk about inclusivity, which the authors I've cited there are Varma and Good. And also I've cited the Wyoming Computer Science Standards, where this is one of the 7 principles, and also the Computer Science Teachers of America, who cited it as one of the 4 pillars of computer science education. So basically for question 3, I have tied that material into the research, and I had more sources available to me through the rewrites. So I used them and documented them in my revisions. In general, I would say my revisions are now grounded in research and also directly address the request for the additional information. Question 4 was based on professional development and for computer science and science. And once again, the request from the committee was that I root it or ground it more strongly in the scientific literature and in the goals. When I wrote my original answer to this question, I found that I was relying heavily on a course I took in creating professional development for K-12 teachers, a course I took during my PhD work as part of my program here at the University of Wyoming. And I realized after the fact, and I've discussed this with Dr. Burrows as well, that the instructor for the course relied heavily upon the book by Lux Horsley, which is definitely a pillar of professional development. The research, the lit review that we did for this course was in our content area. So my research and my literature review were largely about the subject of computer science in the K-12 educational system, and didn't really talk very much about how good professional development is constructed. So once again, I went back into literature, including some wonderful articles that Dr. Burrows provided for me that she had written about developing PD. And I grounded my answer for number 4 in that literature as well. I also looked at the 7 standards of Wyoming computer science education and the 4 pillars, once again, of the Computer Science Teacher Association, and related my answer to number 4 back to those standards and pillars. For question 5, there was a discussion of learning theories, and the request of the committee was that I include the discussion of major theorists and pedagogical implications in science education. So the 4 that were mentioned as examples in question 5 were behaviorism, constructivism, brain-based learning, and experiential learning. And then I also included, although it was not directly called for, a discussion of VARC, which is learning styles, visual, audio, basically reading and kinesthetic, and reflective. So anyway, when I talked about the learning styles, I failed to mention the major theorists. And so when I redid this, when I did the rewrite, I went back through and I ended up going and referencing the major theorists for behaviorism, of course, Skinner and Watson. 2 documents I found were written by Uyghur and Bush. Constructivism, which is largely the foundational work, was done by Piaget and Vygotsky. Once again, we're referencing those same 2 works, Uyghur and Bush, which was a really nice meta analysis of the of those pieces of some pieces of literature that talked about behaviorism and constructivism. Brain-based learning, which was addressed by a married couple, last name Kane, so Kane and Kane, referenced by Kane and Kelly. And experiential learning, which Dewey, Levin, and Kolb, same Kolb who talked extensively about VARC, connected the experiential learning back to the work of Piaget. So I mentioned VARC because at the time I'd taken another class in my PhD program where we discussed VARC pretty intensively, and we especially discussed it from a point of view that it's largely been discredited. Not maybe discredited is too strong of a word, but that learning styles have benefits that really are removed from the stated benefits. One benefit is that students really respond well. They enjoy learning things that are directed more toward their learning styles. But in terms of outcomes, the outcomes are not particularly affected by the style of the material, but rather the material itself lends itself to one type of a presentation or another. For example, map reading is a largely visual endeavor, and kinesthetic learning, learning through doing, is something that's very effective in lab work. So once again, I rewrote question 5 to bring in the major theorists and also to write a tone that was more academic and not as conversational. The work of learning styles and uh, the other major theorists in learning theories is very scientific, and it's rooted in neurology and psychology. And upon reading my original description of that, the question, I realized I had really broken over into a conversational tone. So I attempted to correct that and to write in a more scholarly tone for question number 5. The other thing I did, just in terms of working through this material, I attached a much more robust bibliography. I always keep my bibliography in Mendeley, which is a program that allows you to keep really nice bibliographies in different forms. So I'm going to just take a moment here and do another share so that you can see what my Mendeley program looks like. So basically I have all documents, and then I have some subfolders. Sorry. There we go. So I have my main, just sort of all documents, and then I have subfolders that discuss particular aspects of what I propose for my research, and also anything that I'm interested in studying at the time. One other thing that I found when I was doing my comps was that a lot of the material that I brought in with me to do my original comps in January was really focused on women in computer science. And when I was discussing this with Dr. Burrows, I referred to this as a rabbit hole that I tend to go down. It's an area of terrific interest for me. And so I, if I have things that I can talk about in terms of women in engineering, I will kind of go down that rabbit hole. So I needed to correct that when I did my rewrites. All right, so getting back to my presentation today, my research objective is tied in with Wyoming computer science standards, and also with a group of practicing professional K-12 teachers that I'm working with. But essentially, the vision that's set forth in the Wyoming computer science standards state, this is my guiding light, every student in every school has the opportunity to learn computer science. We believe that computing is fundamental to understanding and participating in an increased technological society, and it is essential for every Wyoming student to learn this as part of the modern curriculum. My research objective is to help realize this vision by teaching educators computer science and computational thinking through the lens of system theory, meaning that delivering the curriculum actually has some ties into engineering systems theory and systems theory as it's used in social work. But in the process, I wanted to set up a sort of a chronology and to tell the story of Wyoming's educational initiative, how unique that is in terms of other educational initiatives in other states or other districts to deliver computer science education, and then to get some data and to do a research project based on the first cohort of students who are currently in the Northwest College's computer science endorsement program. So the proposed study will track the evolution of K-12 computer science education in Wyoming, documenting its progress from a legislative idea to its implications in the Wyoming classroom. So this is an area of study that I am very involved in. Back in 2019, 2020, we launched, when I say we, I mean Northwest College launched an endorsement program for creating a skills certificate that would satisfy the requirements of different state agencies, including the Professional Teaching Standards Board, to allow practicing teachers to teach computer science with an endorsement in the K-12 classrooms. Our first cohort will graduate this summer, and the second cohort will begin their program this summer. And some of the ways I've participated in this program includes I worked on a team to write the curriculum. We took 2 existing computer science classes. We modified 1 engineering science course and added 2 new courses, one in application development and one in social media and cyber citizenship for K-12 teachers. I led the effort for the approval process through our curriculum committee, through the Professional Teaching Standards Board, and through the Wyoming Community College Commission. I helped advertise to service area K-12 school districts, and just recently we've advertised in the newspapers and through news releases at the college. And I've also got to participate in creating those ads. I continue to serve as a coordinator, and I'm also a student in the endorsement program. I will be one of the students graduating, not with an endorsement, with just a skills certificate this July. I wanted to do that so that I could experience what the teachers in the program were experiencing, and most importantly, to modify delivery and content based on the feedback and experiences of the first cohort. I felt I would be able to do that better if I were part of the cohort. So my research proposal and its relationship to the comprehensive exams, it's an extension of my career as a STEM teacher. I'm referencing Q1 as the first prompt from my comps. My methodology has been chosen to reflect a chronological progression from inception to implementation of the experience of a first cohort of teachers. That is tied into the second prompt, which is about my methodology. My research proposal is grounded in the academic literature, which was better discussed in my revisions of Q3, examines the effective development of professional development for experienced K-12 teachers, again, referencing the revisions to prompt 4, and it also reflects the pedagogical implications for adult learners. So I guess I should say andragogical, but pedagogy for adult learners preparing to deliver universal K-12 computer science. So moving on, I envision that my research will be centered around 3 papers. The first is entitled Coding is the New Coal, and Coding is the New Coal is an archival research project. The research question I would like to answer in this research project is, can Wyoming's delivery of universal K-12 in computer science be viewed as a system? And the theoretical framework is systems theory. When I began this project, and I was pulling out different parts of how computer science, K-12 computer science endorsement can be delivered by a college and completed by a teacher, and then that information was brought to their students in the classroom, it just really occurred to me that there were some elements of this that were similar to systems theory. So I began to research systems theory, which is primarily an engineering application, but I realized pretty quickly that there's a lot of academic literature written on systems theory applied to some fields of social work. Social science is primarily social work. And the theoretical framework from my initial reading seems like there is, first of all, a gap in the literature because the delivery of compulsory universal K-12 computer science education has not been studied as a system. The different parts have been studied, but the interrelationship between those parts has not. And I had a quote from Banathy, who said, with very few exceptions, systems theory are only recently emerging as topics of consideration in educational professional development programs. So that was a cue to me that I was being invited to a conversation about this issue. And there's sort of a foundational book called Introduction to Systems Theory that was published in 2013 by Luhmann, Backer, and Gillian. That's pretty interesting to read on this topic. After the archival research and the question of in what ways or can Wyoming's delivery of K-12 computer science be viewed as a system, The second paper is about the first group of teachers in our cohort, teachers' role in Wyoming's integrated universal K-12 computer science education. And the quote that I use here from Richard Hamming, who's a mathematician, says the purpose of computing is insight, not numbers. And I think this is really important when we consider the fact that we want to teach computer science in an integrated fashion. And if you look at the pillars and the foundational principles of the computer science standards here in Wyoming, you find that not very much of it is about learning this specific language. In fact, none of the overview of the computer science standards is about learning particular languages. It's about learning how to think computationally and how to find insight through computers. So the methodology that I'd like to use for this second paper is discourse analysis. And I'd like to use discourse analysis to answer these two questions. How do K-12 teachers characterize their role in computer science education? And how do teachers plan to integrate what they learn in this program into their classroom? So the first order of business that I have after I receive feedback on my proposal, I have an initial IRB proposal that I've written to the University of Wyoming to create discussion boards in the current class that we're teaching, which is application development, to ask teachers who have consented or will consent to being surveyed for this project, some questions that will lead to the answers of these research questions based on the methods of discourse analysis. The theoretical framework is constructivism. The teachers are building this knowledge as they go, and because they're sort of the first out of the gate here, they're going to be the first in their districts to construct the knowledge. And finally, gap in literature, that the integration of computer science into discrete subject areas has not been well pursued at this point. So Hubweiser, who has published prolifically on this topic, states that despite the fact that there have been several and important developments in K-12 computer science education, there's still much to be done, especially in K-12 educational systems with low computer science subject integration. Well, since we're sort of at the beginning of this, we may or may not be able to build a system that has higher computer science subject integration, and then we will have a system that will work with us in that particular way. So I looked into constructivist theory and the emergence of constructivism through a couple of different sources in order to determine if that was the correct theoretical framework, which I think it is. My third and final paper, Wyoming K-12 Teachers' Experiences Teaching Computer Science, Expectations versus Reality. The methodology for this is quantitative or mixed methods. And I really wanted to have the opportunity to apply some of the skills and ways of thinking that I had learned in my research classes in that minor in quantitative research methods that I learned in the classes that I primarily took from you, Dr. McKim, in order to sort of have an opportunity to apply those to something in the real world. So considering either quantitative or mixed methods, my research question would be, what connections do teachers identify between what they learned or experienced in Northwest College's K-12 Computer Science Endorsement Program and what they experience in the classroom in terms of learning outcome? Now, when I move down the scale a little bit here, the theoretical framework, after a little bit of research, I believe would be pragmatic, because it's always knowledge based on experience in this way. So I really kind of want to cut down to the guts of a more quantitative survey instrument at this point. But the gap in literature is really all about professional development among STEM teachers, connecting it to professional development in a systematic manner, especially in regard to the connection between professional development and learning outcomes. So in other words, there's an area to be studied that Dr. Burrows herself cited based on some work by Hewson a few years earlier, that really indicates that after the PD is done, that following through and working with those teachers or the people who experience a PD and how it really worked and what the learning outcomes were for their students is a gap in the literature at that point. So for this particular paper, what I would like to do, I will have contact with these 15 people for the last time in July of this year. And I would like to do a preliminary survey indicating getting some quantitative and perhaps mixed methods answers to what they perceive is going to happen when they take this information back in the classroom, and then send the same or a similar survey to them in December to get comparative answers between what they thought in July when they're just finishing the program and in December after they've actually had the opportunity to teach this in the classroom. All right, so next up, what happens next? The first thing I want to do, if after I receive your feedback, is to submit the first IRB proposal to conduct discourse analysis for the second paper. The archival research is really not research on human subjects, so I can do that as a document. I talked with a history professor about sort of establishing a chronology and establishing a cause and effect and an interrelational systems theory analysis for the first paper. And so I can start working on that as soon as I get your feedback. But in order to start my second paper, I need to submit an IRB proposal to conduct the discourse analysis. And I'd really like to do this as soon as possible because I hope to collect data for them in the course that we're teaching right now, application development. But the purpose is to identify main themes of how current K-12 teachers characterize their roles. And the proposed subjects are currently pursuing a K-12 endorsement in computer science through Northwest College. The data will be collected from guided discussions that emerge in online forums in which these subjects will participate. So we have found that with the teachers, the discussion forums are extraordinarily robust. They're very good at discussing these things with each other. Sometimes in undergraduate classes, we don't see the same level of discourse, but it's really been interesting to see how completely they are engaged in their own ideas and in the ideas of their classmates. So the research question that I would like to answer is, how do current K-12 teachers characterize their role in Wyoming's compulsory computer science education? And I would like to address this in 4 online discussions with the prompts as follows. Prompt 1, is compulsory K-12 computer science education important to your school district and to the state of Wyoming? Prompt 2, what specific skills and knowledge will you be able to impart to your students? Prompt 3, how do you foresee applying specific computer science skills to what you have learned in the classroom? Or, excuse me, computer science skills you have learned to your classroom? And prompt 4, in terms of specific instruction and overarching issues, how do you see compulsory K-12 education as a vehicle for student empowerment? That ties directly back to one of Wyoming computer science standards. So then for the remainder, I have charted out a timeline or a plan of work in order to hopefully complete my dissertation by not this coming summer, of course, not summer of 2021, but the summer of 2022. So I've laid out my further steps. And as you can see, one of the first things I want to do is to send corrected questions for paper. It would be paper 2 to the IRB. I'll have to correct that. And then upon the first IRB approval, collect data and finish literature review this summer. So then in the fall of this coming year, I have one more course to complete, which is Advanced Science Research 2, currently taking Advanced Science Research 1 with Dr. Slater. So I'll complete my last class. I'll write the final version of paper 1, which is my archival research, write a draft of paper 2, which is the discourse analysis, and then write the final for that paper and submit it for publication. In December, collect post-teacher data, either quantitative or mixed, for paper 3, complete all the work for that course, and at that point, assuming approval of my research, I will be ABD. And then my further steps in the spring and summer of 2022 are to write the draft and final version and submit paper 3 for publication, write draft of my dissertation, some of which I'm already working on. I'm working on literature review, obviously. It's a little, it's been a very humbling and enlightening experience to learn how foundational the literature review is to even finding a direction to write these papers. So I'm doing that in Advanced Science Research 1. Dr. Slater, after I have approval for the discourse analysis piece, Dr. Slater has encouraged me to write my chapter 3 or my methodology, including a description of all the participants in my research study. So I'm going to start working on that as soon as I get approval for paper number 2, assuming that I do. And so hopefully by March of 2022, approximately 11 months from now, I would have a draft of my dissertation ready to submit in April, tidy it up, defend in May, submit a final version in June, and anticipate graduation in the summer of 2022. So, Dr. McKim, I want to thank you again for helping me in all the ways that you've helped me. And I want to let you know that I appreciate you serving on my committee, and that your expertise in research has been absolutely fundamentally important to me. And I've also found the courses that I've taken from you to be among the most enjoyable that I've had in the program. So thank you very much. And I look forward to visiting with you for questions Tuesday at approximately 12:30. Thanks again.